So we have been exploring together some of the parables. And what I know about Unity congregations is we are a very diverse group of people. We are diverse in many ways, and one of the ways that we are diverse is in how familiar we may or may not be with some of the stories in the Bible, New Testament, Old Testament. Some of us find our way into Unity specifically because we didn't like the way the Bible was taught in the churches that we might have been brought up in. Others of us find our way into Unity just because we were looking for something that is spiritual and that is practical and that is inclusive and studies not just from one sacred text, but from many sacred texts. So I'm aware whenever I choose to do something that is built on stories in the Bible, that I'm speaking to a wide range of knowledge. And what I hope to do is to make some of these teachings more accessible, more understandable, more relatable, and most of all, more practical. The parables are stories. They're stories, teaching stories that Jesus gave, and they used symbols and ideas that his listeners were very familiar with. I believe that one of the very best ways to teach anything is to teach by story, because we tend to remember stories, don't we? And if we can remember a story that we have been told, we can likely tease apart, even after many years, what that teaching was, what those helpful ideas and messages were. And I think that's one of the reasons that Jesus probably taught by story. He gave a story with symbols, then he explained what those symbols might mean or how to use them, so that people then, I think, could remember the story and recreate the message as well. And so today we're going to take a look at the story or the parable of the lost sheep. And one of the interesting things about the parable of the lost sheep is it's really one of a trilogy of parables teaching essentially the same idea. We have the parable of the lost sheep. One sheep is lost out of 100. We have the parable of the lost coin. One coin is lost out of 10. And we have the parable of the lost son, also known the prodigal son. One son out of 2. Whenever there is repetition in the Bible, and I suppose this could be true of other sacred texts as well, when there's repetition of a story or an idea, and it's in a way it's like saying the authors were putting it in all caps, bold, large print, and underlining it. You know, kind of saying to us, take note here, there's something important here. And in so many of the cases, Jesus would be teaching to people that were the ones that he should have been avoiding according to the religious leaders and teachers of the day. He associated with tax collectors and prostitutes and all different kinds of people that the religious elite thought he shouldn't be with, and certainly that they didn't deserve his teaching. But that didn't matter to him. He was about, I believe, teaching principle, teaching consciousness. And it says that except in parable he did not teach. Except in parable he did not teach. So the parable of the lost sheep, let me read it to you. Here's the context. This is from the Gospel of Luke. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." So important putting a little bit of context around there. Then Jesus told them this parable. So all of them, he was teaching at the same time. Then Jesus told them this parable. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? Now think about it. He's talking to shepherds, right? Their livelihood are their sheep. And he's saying, doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after to find the lost sheep and looks until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders. That's the way they would carry them. Joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep." And here's where I think that the story probably ended, and then those who came after and kind of doctored up the parables and doctored up some of Jesus' teachings, like when he gave us what we call the Lord's Prayer, he didn't end it with, "For thine is the kingdom and the glory forever and ever, amen." That was added afterwards. That's not from Jesus' words. You are aware of things like this, right? Right. So he finishes saying that the sheep is lost. Which of you would not go look for that sheep? And when you find that sheep, you would rejoice, you would bring it home. And I think that was the end of the teaching. But then it's as if those who came after him really wanted to make sure that there was some control. And here's what I think was added. I tell you that in the same way there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent. Doesn't that sound more like churchianity than a teacher of consciousness? It does to me anyway. It does to me anyway. I think the real emphasis that Jesus is giving here, first of all, it's the fact of who he's talking to, and the fact that he's saying and talking in a way that his people could relate. You've got something of value, and part of it is lost, and you're going to go do what you can to find that which is lost. Excuse me, and you're going to bring it back, and you're going to tell everybody about it. You're going to be happy that you found what was lost, and you're going to rejoice. You're going to rejoice. And so as I was thinking about this even more deeply throughout the week, because I write these messages way in advance, and then I pull them out the Sunday before I give them to you, and I reflect on them throughout the week. And I do in such a way to see what might be moving or changing or deepening in me. And I found myself kind of shifting a little bit in what I think is an important message of this parable. I think it's ultimately about finding ourselves, about recovering our soul, recovering our spirit, recovering our identity, and not from God's punishment. First of all, we don't believe in God as a being that punishes. So it's about finding ourselves, recovering our souls, our divine essence, but not from a God or something that punishes us, but rather from a sense of separation. A sense of separation, a sense of forgetting the truth of who we are, which is pretty miraculous, is pretty wonderful, is pretty darn special. But many of us don't get who and what we really are. Many of us don't understand that we are so much more than the things we have done, or even the things we know, or the bodies that we inhabit, or the life experiences we've had, that we are of God, we are of spirit, we are of stardust, we are of the one. And when we remember that, when we recover that, there is rejoicing, there is a sense of wholeness, there is a sense of well-being. So I think ultimately it's about finding ourselves, recovering our soul, not from God's punishment, but from any sense of separation of our oneness with that which is divine. It's about realizing that we are worthy, not unworthy, that we are whole, not broken. We may have had things happen to us that have caused us to forget that, or caused us to feel wounded or separate or ashamed or humiliated or embarrassed. But that's not who we are at the depths of our being. That's not the soul. That's not the spirit of us. I'm a fan of the writings and the concepts of Stephen Covey, and I think it was beginning of last year I did a series on his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Can't remember if this was in that book, but it is a concept of his, and I remember when I first came upon it that it really spoke to me. And it's the concept of the idea that the key to the 99 is the one. You may or may not know this about Covey. He was a very religious person, born and raised in the Mormon faith, so he's well acquainted with these stories. He wrote, "I have found that the key to the 99 is the one." Now, he's making reference to the parable I've just told you. "I have found that the key to the 99 is the one, particularly the one that is testing the patience and the good humor of many. It is the love and the discipline of the one student, the one child, that communicates the love for the others." I'm going to repeat that. I think that's a powerful, powerful line. It's the love and the discipline of the one student, the one child that communicates the love for the others. It's how you treat the one that reveals how you regard the 99. Isn't that beautiful? It's how you treat the one that reveals how you regard the 99, because everyone is ultimately a one. Everyone is ultimately a one. And if we just want to look at it in a much more surface level of the parable and think of that one sheep that's gone astray as one individual that has gone astray, what Covey is saying is how you treat that one, how we regard the wounded person, the person who feels broken, the person who feels marginalized, ostracized by society. It's how we treat that one that really speaks volumes about how we regard the totality, the human family. What does that suggest about us as a society today, right? That how we treat the marginalized really speaks to how we regard all of us. The key to the 99 is the one. And that's just one more surface way, I think, of looking at this parable. In the Bible, there are many different stories about this idea of recovering that which has been lost. Recovering that which has been lost. Some of the very basic elements of teaching in this parable are these: seeking the lost. Seeking the lost. Have you ever lost anything? Yeah? Have you ever lost anything of value? Maybe an actual thing. You lost it. I remember one of the very earliest days in the during lockdown. I needed to go grocery shopping. I needed to go out to Costco. And remember those days where you had to really prepare and you would be standing in line and you had to wait your turn to get in. And it happened to be a rainy day. And I remember getting out of my car. I parked my car, getting out of my car. I had my umbrella in one hand, my membership card in the other, so I wouldn't hold anybody up. And I put my mask on, and then I dropped my umbrella, and I had to take my mask off in the parking lot, and I'm trying to get there right away and finally get into the store. And for some strange reason, when I put my mask back on, for some reason, I touched my ears. And the diamond earrings that I wear weren't there. In the pulling off of my mask in the parking lot to get the umbrella and the other things that I had dropped, I managed to pull both of those earrings off, the little rubber part of the mask. I talk about feeling like losing something that meant something to me. That meant something to me. I didn't realize it until I had actually come out of the store, I think. And then I'm frantically looking. Oh, I must have looked like a fool. Looking around the parking lot for two tiny little, I found them. These are the very same. Yeah, and this is just superficial stuff, right? Even though, they're valuable to me, it's not important. Like, we can lose opportunities that mean something to us. Relationships because we didn't handle them well. So we can all relate, can we not, to the idea of having lost something that meant something to us. And then if we were fortunate enough to find it, because if it meant something to us and it's possible to look for it, what are we going to do? We're going to look. If I told you there was a winning lottery ticket somewhere in this sanctuary, I promise you we would look for it, right? We would look until what? Until we found it. And when we found it, how would we feel? Ooh, joyful, happy. It would be like the shepherd that put the sheep on his shoulders and probably was, jogging back to his friends, rejoicing, I have found the one that has been lost. So we know what that feels like. And imagine when it really is something that's really important, not a physical possession, but something that's really, really important to us. And that's what spiritual teaching in so many ways is always trying to remind us of. Make sure you are valuing the things that really deserve your value, that deserve your time, that deserve your heart, that deserve your talents and your skill. in the parable of the lost sheep, there's a sense of compassion and non-judgment of welcoming back. That's another level of the teaching. And I think that's one of the reasons that we are given the context of the teaching to begin with, that Jesus was talking to the tax collectors and the sinners, a way of saying those who were not highly regarded in the society. And he's trying to reach them at the same time that he's trying to reach the teachers of the law and the Pharisees and the religious leaders. And I think conveying this idea that all of us have value, all of us are worthy. And what's beautiful about these parables or any of these kinds of stories is if we sit with them deeper and we really reflect on them, we begin to pull out even more significant teachings. Here are some other ways that you can look at this, a deeper symbolic, mystical level of the parable. The sheep can represent our soul, or the individual seeking enlightenment. That part of you, that part of me, that came into this teaching because we were hungering for something. Can you remember that? Hungering for insight, maybe hungering for healing, hungering for wisdom, hungering for spiritual awareness. That part of us that came in with that hunger, that earnestness. The shepherd, to me, is not an anthropomorphic God, but it is the divine orchestration, the orchestration of life itself with capital L, that seems to me to be set up to conspire to help us grow. When I look out at the world around me, when I look out at nature, when I think of what I've learned of evolutionary biology, I can't help but be inspired and encouraged that there is this evolutionary thrust toward growth and development with everything, not just nature, but with us. And so this shepherd as the divine, it's like our higher self, that when we do go astray, when I use the word astray, I mean when we forget who we are. When we forget who we are, there is that in us that's trying to pull us back and say, no, remember you are a divine being created in the image and after the likeness of God. In the image and after the likeness of God, in the image and after the likeness of wholeness. The joy of reunion is a joy of becoming whole again. Do you remember when you really started to get this teaching? Do you remember how that felt? Some of you do. Some of you are very, very quiet. It's okay, I'm talking to myself this morning and I'm having a good time. When you get who you are, and I do not mean in an egotistical way, I don't think people who are spiritually mature, awakened, and enlightened are the ones who tell you they are. They have no need to. They have no desire. They're not trying to prove anything. When we get who and what we really are, there is a sense of wholeness and completion. There is a sense of deep inner confidence and calmness that sustains us through whatever it is that we're dealing with that might feel overwhelming and very difficult. The joy of reunion, the joy of becoming whole again, it's when we reunite with our true nature. It's when a spiritual seeker experiences that deep moment of awakening. I don't even like to use the word enlightenment because I think it's thrown around too haphazardly. But when the spiritual seeker really experiences not just that moment of awakening for themselves, but the true realization of that possibility for everyone else. And that reflects a divine joy and fulfillment that really goes beyond words. It's not enough to know about God. And one of the things that I think religion tends to do, and I think you can almost say this of any religion, It teaches us about the religion. It teaches us about the religion's rules and rituals and customs, and that may have its place. It teaches us about God, or about whatever that presence is called. It teaches us about it. But teaching us about it is not the same thing as experiencing it. That's where spirituality, I think, comes in. I think that's a significant difference between religion and spirituality. In spiritual practice, we're not trying to help somebody learn about God or learn about the Buddha nature or learn about Atma. We're trying to help people have an awareness of that and an experience of that. Meister Eckhart, the 13th century German mystic, talked about having a first-hand and immediate experience of God. Can you see why the church in the early days wasn't too keen on that? Because if you could have a first-hand and immediate experience of God, you didn't need the church, right? You didn't need any institution. I love when people say, I don't like organized religion. I say, you're at home in unity. We don't tend to be too organized. Anyway, I digress there. You don't need that. And in fact, that for too many people becomes a substitute for the real thing. The real thing is the experience. I wish I could take credit for this, but I can't, and I don't know who to give credit to for it. But it's the difference between the menu and the meal. The difference between the menu and the meal. You can have pretty pictures of the meal. You can have a description on the menu that just makes you salivate. But that is not satisfying if you don't get the meal, right? What we're after, and what I think is a deep teaching, at least for me, of the parable of the lost sheep, is we're about the meal. And the meal comes when we remember who and what we are and live from that as consistently as we can. In Unity, our goal is not to convert people to a way of thinking. Our goal is to help people have that experience that I'm talking about. And then perhaps to help others know that they can have that experience as well. Because when we do, everything else works so much better. When we do, everything works so much better. It's as if it becomes, I'm thinking of Robert Fulghum here for a moment. Do you remember Robert Fulghum? Everything I ever needed to learn, I learned in kindergarten, and some really great books and really great stories. He, every once in a while, instead of wearing a wristwatch, wears a compass on his wrist. And he does that so that he can remind himself to move in the right direction. That it's not about time, it's about moving in the right direction. When we get this sense, this experience of ourselves as eternal spiritual beings, it's like we are living our lives with a compass, always pointing true north, always pointing toward, always helping us move in the right direction. I don't remember all of the special details of this story, but I do remember the teaching of this story. And it's a story about a man didn't have a whole lot, but he found in a bazaar a beautiful box that he was just drawn to, like maybe a treasure chest box or something. And it was so beautiful that he decided to splurge and buy it. And he brought it home and he put it on the table in his home. And he looked at it and enjoyed it every time he saw that beautiful box on that table. But then he started to notice that the table didn't look so good. And so he realized the table needed to be cleaned and loved a little bit and taken care of. And he did that. And now the table really supported the beauty of that box. But then he noticed that the floor didn't look so well. And he realized that maybe he needed to clean the floor and care for the floor a little bit better. One thing after another, and it wasn't about acquiring more things. It was about when he got that one thing that seemed so special and so precious, everything else started to reorient itself around it. Do you get the beauty of that? I'm sure you do. And the thing I'm talking about is not something you can buy in a bazaar and put on a table. It's really getting the magnificence of what you are as a spiritual being. And when you get that, when you come into wholeness, when you recover from any feelings of brokenness or that somebody told you you are inherently bad or wrong or flawed or all of those things, when that gets healed and whole, everything else in your life becomes reoriented. You find that the kind of people that are drawn to you and that you are drawn to continue to lift you up, that you might lift others up. You find that you have a grace and a confidence to move forward and to do things that you didn't think you could do before, because there's this rejoicing in the discovery of who and what you are. And so I want to close again with the words I'd been saying a few times. Ultimately, it's about finding ourselves, recovering our identity, recovering our spirit, recovering our souls, not from any idea of punishment or judgment, but from the sense of separation, any sense of unworthiness, any sense of brokenness. Namaste.